In a world where the boundaries between reality and nightmare blur, where every shadow hides a secret and every whisper carries a warning, one channel dares to venture into the unknown. These are Scary Stories Unleashed, your gateway to the unexplained and frightening outer world. From chilling urban legends to true stories that send shivers down your spine, we bring the darkness to light. But beware, once you enter, there is no turning back. The horror you will witness here will haunt your dreams and your reality. Subscribe now and join us on a journey to the abyss. Press the bell icon so you don't miss any descent into darkness. Because here in Scary Stories Unleashed, the fears never end. It was a chilly Friday night, November 3rd, 2023, when I, Melissa Hart, a 28-year-old cashier at Walmart, found myself at the front of the store, ready to finish my shift. The clock ticked toward midnight, casting a dull glow over the nearly empty aisles. With only a few customers left, I was eager to count my drawer and head home to my warm apartment, where I could finally curl up with a book and forget the world for a while. As I organized the magazines on the checkout counter, I noticed a woman in her mid-30s standing at the end of the line. She looked disheveled, her hair unkempt, and her clothes wrinkled, clearly showing signs of distress. What struck me most was the way she clutched her small child, a 5-year-old boy, who gazed blankly at the conveyor belt, his eyes wide and unblinking. The sight sent a shiver down my spine. "Just a few more minutes, ma'am," I said, trying to keep my tone light, but her response was a faint nod, her gaze distant, lost somewhere far beyond the store's fluorescent lights. I could feel an unsettling energy radiating from her, something I couldn't quite put my finger on, but it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. When it was finally her turn, she placed a few items on the counter, a pack of gum, a soda, and to my shock, a large kitchen knife. My heart raced as I scanned the items, and I hesitated, glancing at her face. There was a wildness in her eyes that sent alarm bells ringing in my head. Ma'am, you might not want to," I stammered, trying to make sense of the situation. But she cut me off. "It's mine," she snapped, gripping the knife tightly, her knuckles white. I could see the frantic energy radiating off her, and I felt a pulse of fear as I took a cautious step back. "Okay, no problem," I said slowly, forcing a smile, trying to diffuse the tension. My instinct was to calm her down, but I could feel the air growing heavier, charged with something dark and unnameable. "Please, just ring me up," she whispered, her voice trembling. I nodded, trying to keep my composure, but my hands shook as I punched in the prices. The child remained silent, eyes wide, almost as if he were in a trance. As I handed her the receipt, she suddenly leaned closer, her breath hot against my face. "You have to help me. They're coming for me." Panic coursed through me, and I struggled to process her words. "Ma'am, Before I could finish, she jerked back, her eyes darting around as if searching for invisible threats. The atmosphere shifted, and I felt a suffocating weight pressing against my chest. Suddenly, she lunged across the counter, grabbing my wrist with surprising strength. "You can't let them take me," she screamed, her voice rising to a fever pitch. I was frozen, caught in her frantic grasp, as the world around us descended into chaos. "Get away," I shouted, struggling to break free, but her grip tightened. "Somebody help." Just then, a commotion erupted from the entrance. A group of teenagers burst into the store, laughing and shoving each other, oblivious to the scene unfolding at the checkout. Their laughter echoed through the aisles, a stark contrast to the tension in the air. The woman's eyes narrowed, and she released me, turning her attention toward the new arrivals. "No, you'll all see," she shrieked. And in that moment, I realized she was no longer just a mother in distress, but a woman pushed to the brink of madness. "Ma'am, please," I pleaded, trying to regain control of the situation. "You need to calm down." But she was beyond reason. "They're in the walls," she screamed, her voice echoing off the shelves. "They're everywhere." The shoppers froze, confusion and fear etched on their faces as they watched the scene unfold. One of the teenagers, a tall boy with a skateboard, stepped closer, trying to defuse the situation. "Hey lady, it's okay. Just breathe, all right?" he said, raising his hands in a placating gesture. But the woman's gaze shifted. locking onto him as if he were the embodiment of her fears. "You don't understand. This isn't a game," she wailed, the panic in her voice rising to a crescendo. In that moment, it was as if time stood still. I could see the fear in the eyes of the onlookers, the child still staring blankly, and the tension thrumming in the air like a live wire. I felt a mix of sympathy and terror, realizing that this was a person at the end of her rope, and I was witnessing her descent into madness. Just then, the store manager, a burly man named Frank, emerged from the back room, sensing the commotion. "What's going on here?" he barked, his authoritative voice cutting through the chaos. The woman turned to him, a mix of desperation and fury in her eyes. "You have to help me? They're coming," she cried, her voice breaking. Frank stepped closer, trying to assess the situation. "All right, let's take a breath here," he said, trying to calm her down. "No one's coming for you. You're safe." But it was too late. The woman's eyes widened in realization, and with a sudden burst of energy, she lunged for the knife on the counter. "No, I won't let them take me," she screamed as the chaos erupted anew. In that moment, I felt the world tilt on its axis. I had seen enough horror movies to know what came next, but this was real life, and there were no heroes in this story. "Stop," I yelled, but my voice was drowned out by the screams of the customers. The teenagers scattered, ducking behind displays as the woman brandished the knife, her expression a mix of fear and defiance. Frank stepped forward, hands raised, trying to talk her down. "Put the knife down, ma'am. You don't need to do this." But her resolve was crumbling, and in a moment of sheer panic, she turned and bolted toward the exit, knife still in hand. The automatic doors slid open, and she dashed into the night, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. The store erupted into chaos. Shoppers rushed for the exits, some crying, others shouting. I stood frozen at the register, heart racing, adrenaline coursing through my veins. The little boy remained, his face pale and ghostly, staring at the space where his mother had just been. "Someone call the police." Frank barked, his voice breaking the spell. The teenage boy glanced back at me, eyes wide with shock. Is she going to hurt someone?" I shook my head, my voice trembling. "I don't know. I think she just lost it." As the sirens wailed in the distance, I could feel the weight of the moment settling over me. I had witnessed a woman's unraveling, her descent into madness triggered by something I couldn't understand. In the aftermath, the store felt different. The laughter of the teenagers no longer echoed, replaced with an unsettling silence. I looked at the boy, still standing there, and realized that I would never forget this night. A night when the ordinary turned terrifying, and a woman's desperate plea echoed in the empty aisles long after she had vanished into the darkness. As the police arrived and the chaos began to settle, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were all just a heartbeat away from losing our grip on reality. And in that moment, I understood. Sometimes, the monsters aren't lurking in the shadows, but are the people we least expect. Pushed to the brink in a world that often feels indifferent to our struggles. It was a typical Tuesday evening, and I was working my shift at Walmart, my feet aching from hours of standing and scanning. The store was unusually quiet, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead as I stocked shelves in the grocery aisle. I preferred it this way. Less chaos, fewer people. But as I moved through the aisles, I could sense an undercurrent of tension, an electric charge in the air that made my skin prickle. As I turned the corner, I noticed two men standing at the end of the aisle, their voices rising in a heated argument. I had seen them both around the store before. One was a regular customer, a man in his 50s named Steve, well known for his gruff demeanor and penchant for confrontation. The other was younger, maybe in his late 20s, wearing a dark hoodie that obscured most of his face. Just because you think you're better than everyone else doesn't mean you can take what's mine. Steve shouted, his face flushed with anger. The younger man laughed, a cold, harsh sound that sent a shiver down my spine. "You think I care about your pathetic loyalty? You mean nothing to me." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. This was escalating quickly, and I knew I had to intervene before things got out of hand. I stepped closer, my heart pounding in my chest. "Hey guys, let's calm down," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This isn't the place for this." but they didn't even acknowledge me. Steve took a step forward, his fists clenched at his sides. You don't get to talk to me like that. You think you can just waltz in here and take what you want? The younger man's expression twisted into a sneer. You don't own this place, old man. You're just another nobody. My instincts screamed that I needed to defuse the situation. Please, just walk away. It's not worth it, I pleaded, but my words fell on deaf ears. Steve suddenly lunged forward, his face contorted with rage. Get out of my way, he shouted, pushing the younger man back. I felt a surge of fear as I realized it was too late to de-escalate. In an instant, the younger man pulled a knife from his pocket, the blade glinting ominously under the harsh lights. You want to see how nobody I am? He hissed, taking a step back, his eyes wild. Panic gripped me as I shouted, Stop! Put that away! But the words barely left my lips before everything spiraled into chaos. The knife plunged into Steve's side with a sickening thud, and I froze, my heart dropping into my stomach. Blood sprayed across the aisle, the crimson mist painting the shelves in a horrific tableau. Steve gasped, eyes wide with shock, his hand instinctively clutching the wound as he crumpled to the floor. Time seemed to freeze as I stood there, paralyzed by disbelief. The younger man stood over him, breathing heavily, a look of twisted triumph etched on his face. I warned you, he spat, the knife dripping with blood. I stumbled back, my instincts kicking in as I fought to comprehend the horror unfolding before me. Someone call 911. I shouted, my voice echoing through the store, but no one seemed to hear. The commotion had drawn the attention of a few nearby customers, but they were too stunned to act. The attacker turned his gaze toward me, and I felt my blood run cold. You saw nothing, he growled, his eyes locking onto mine with a predatory intensity. I nodded, fear choking me as I slowly backed away, desperate to create distance between us. My mind raced, trying to process what had just happened. I had seen violence before, but this was different, raw and visceral, a grotesque display of humanity's darkest instincts. The young man turned and fled, disappearing down an aisle, leaving me alone with the aftermath of the brutal act. I could hear the distant wail of sirens approaching, but they felt like a cruel joke, too far away, too late to help. I rushed to Steve's side, kneeling beside him, the metallic scent of blood filling my nostrils. Stay with me, please, I begged, pressing my hands against the wound, trying to stem the flow of blood, though I knew it was futile. Help me, Steve gasped, his voice barely a whisper. His face was pale, and I could see the life draining from his eyes. Help is on the way, I lied, my heart racing as I glanced around, desperate for someone to come and take control of the situation. Just hold on, okay? He shook his head, a look of despair crossing his features. I shouldn't have gotten involved, he murmured, his voice breaking. It was stupid. No, don't say that, I urged, tears stinging my eyes. You were trying to do the right thing. Just hang in there. But as I pressed harder against the wound, I felt his body grow weaker, his breathing slowing. I should have known better, he gasped, his voice fading. I watched in horror as the light in his eyes flickered, dimming like a candle snuffed out by the wind. Please, don't leave me, I begged, my hands shaking as I clutched at him. But it was too late. Steve's body went limp, and I felt a wave of despair wash over me. Just then, the store erupted into chaos as the police burst through the doors, their uniforms a stark contrast to the horror that had just unfolded. I scrambled to my feet, my heart racing as they rushed to the scene, their shouts mixing with the cries of shocked customers. Step back! Clear the area, one officer shouted as they moved to assess the situation. I stumbled back, my mind racing, but I couldn't shake the feeling of guilt that clung to me like a shroud. I had witnessed a man die, and all I could do was watch helplessly. The officers began to question witnesses, their voices a dull roar in my ears. I could barely process their questions, my thoughts spiraling as I replayed the events in my mind. Did anyone see where he went? One officer asked, urgency in his tone. I don't know, I stammered, shaking my head. He just ran off. I didn't see where he went. As they secured the scene and called for medical assistance, I felt an overwhelming wave of nausea wash over me. I had never experienced anything like this before. The reality of humanity's darkness had unfolded before my eyes, and it would haunt me long after the sirens faded. After what felt like an eternity, the paramedics arrived, rushing in with their equipment. I watched as they worked on Steve, but it was clear that he was already gone. The reality of it hit me like a punch to the gut, and I felt tears streaming down my face. I stepped back, the world feeling surreal as I took in the chaos around me. The store that had once been a mundane shopping experience had transformed into a scene of horror, a reminder of the fragility of life and the steep price of loyalty. As I left the store that night, the weight of what had happened pressed heavily on my chest. I knew I would carry that burden forever, a reminder of the darkness that lurked in the hearts of men and the terrifying reality of the world we lived in. In the days that followed, I replayed the events over and over in my mind, grappling with feelings of guilt and helplessness. I had witnessed a man's life snuffed out over a petty argument, the price of loyalty steep and unforgiving. And as I walked past the entrance of that Walmart, I vowed to never forget what I had seen. How quickly things could turn, how fragile life truly was. The memories would haunt me, but perhaps that was the only way to honor Steve's sacrifice. A reminder that loyalty could cost you everything, and that sometimes the darkness would emerge from the most unexpected places. It was a busy Friday afternoon just a few days before the holidays, and I found myself at Walmart with my 2 kids and a close friend. I usually avoid holiday crowds, but we were running low on essentials, so I had no choice but to brave the store. My son, a kindergartner, was sitting in the cart, happily chatting away, while my toddler daughter babbled in her seat. My friend had stepped away to take a work call, leaving me to navigate the chaos alone. I was in the pharmacy section trying to decide on a hair dye when my daughter suddenly said, "Scary." I turned around and saw a middle-aged man about 20 feet away, staring intently at her. My daughter is a sweet, bubbly child, and strangers often smile at her or say hello. But this felt different. His gaze was unsettling, and I immediately felt a knot form in my stomach. I grabbed the cart and headed toward the grocery section, hoping to put some distance between us. As I pushed the cart, I could feel his eyes on us. My friend and I had these matching bracelets that let us buzz each other when we needed attention, so I sent him 3 quick buzzes, our code for "I need you." Within moments, my friend appeared by my side, and I quietly explained the situation. He glanced over and noticed the man still lingering nearby, pretending to browse but clearly keeping an eye on us. We moved to the cereal aisle, and I could feel the man's presence trailing us. My son, still perched in the cart, leaned over and whispered, "Mom, that man is following us." My heart sank. I tried to stay calm for the kids, but my mind was racing. I decided to head to the checkout lanes, hoping the man would back off in a more crowded area. As we approached the registers, I glanced over my shoulder and saw him standing at the end of the aisle, just watching us. My friend subtly positioned himself between the man and us, and I could tell he was on high alert. We quickly paid for our items and left the store, but as we walked to the car, I noticed the man had followed us out. He stood near the entrance, still staring. My friend loaded the groceries while I buckled the kids into their car seats. As we drove away, I saw the man walking toward the parking lot, his eyes locked on our car. I called the store to report him, but they said they couldn't do anything unless he had done something threatening. The rest of the day, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I kept looking over my shoulder, even at home. That night, I checked the local news and saw a report about a man matching the same description being arrested for attempting to lure a child into his car at a nearby park. The police had been looking for him for weeks. I felt sick to my stomach, realizing how close we had come to danger. From that day on, I became hyper-vigilant about keeping my kids close in public, no matter how crowded or inconvenient it was. That unsettling encounter at Walmart still haunts me, especially during the holidays when the stores are packed, and it's easier for predators to blend in. It's a reminder that even in the most ordinary places, danger can lurk just out of sight.